Hello everybody, we are going to compare the NDH20 versus the S4R from Ollo Audio. And you may be saying, didn't we already do this? We did the bass test. Now it's time for the mid test. The mid test. This is me being very close to the microphone because I want to emphasize we're talking about the mid test. I'm actually using a new microphone. This is the Bach U195. It's got a fat setting. Not that it makes me fatter or that it makes the microphone fatter, it just enhances the midtones a little bit and the sub bass and brings out all that sort of goodness, hopefully. So, mid test. A 32 ohm 50 millimeter dynamic driver versus a 150 ohm 38 millimeter dynamic driver. Both closed-back headphones. The question is, which one has a more natural reproduction of the vocals? Now, before we get into the actual sound test, we have to define what exactly we're looking for. We know for a fact, from multivarious testing of the NDH20, that the Neumanns are, in fact, a much more closed-off headphone. Now, you might say to yourself, well, that's because it's a closed-back headphone. That's why it's closed off. To which I would respond, there are other closed-back headphones we have compared the NDH20 to, and they don't sound as closed off. In fact, they sound quite open for closed-back headphones. And one of those headphones that sounds open is the, in my opinion, is the Ollo Audio S4R. So, does it give a natural reproduction of the vocals? Does it have a natural, more detailed separation of the vocalists? And does it provide any hint of coloration to the sound? So in other words, do one of the headphones boost the vocals in any way? And do one of the headphones recess the vocals in any way, making it U-shaped, so to speak, scooped out, as the NDH20 have reportedly been to do, right? That's reportedly what the NDH20 do, and in my experience, that tends to be true. So let's compare the two. So let's start with the Ollo Audio, which I currently have on my head, plugged into an A/B switch, which itself is plugged into the THX AAA desktop, which is our standard bearer for these types of tests so far. At least it is with these two headphones. Let's start with Want You Back by Haim. Now, here are a couple things about Want You Back. There are three vocalists, the primary and the two backup. The primary vocalist can get sibilant, depending on the words that she's saying, obviously. And the backup vocalists, they have a separation. They have a very clear separation if you have the right headphone, meaning they have different tonalities. They are not entirely on cue with each other. And their differences should be realized easily. You shouldn't have to go out and hunt for the separation of the vocals, in other words. I have the Ollo Audio on my head. We are at negative 27.5. I'm going to bump this up to negative 25, and here we go. Not sibilant. There's that micro detail around 10 seconds when she says the word we. The W gets dragged out. It's like we. Do you hear that? We. That's my, hyper unrealistic presentation of what the song is doing. So what she does is we, and she drags that out, and it sounds rough and gravelly, and it's really great on a good pair of headphones, and it comes out crystal clear on the Ollo. Let's keep playing. The guitar, it sounds like there might be a piano. Yeah, there is a piano playing in the background. It's in the lower registers. Here comes the backup vocalist, clearly separate from each other. There's one on the left, one on the right ear cup. They both have vastly different tonalities. They're not entirely on key. The Ollo Audio is doing a fantastic job of showing me that. Now all the vocalists are singing. You have the guitar, the piano, and the drum. I can hear three vocalists quite clearly. And indeed, if I just sit back and I listen, I can hear all three with their different tonalities. The drum is playing a little louder now. And all three vocalists are clearly audible. The drum is not overpowering any of the other frequencies, and that piano that's playing in the background, it's not interfering with anything. So it's a very smooth presentation of the music without losing any of that great detail that I just spoke of. Now, let us go to the NDH20. I have the 20s on my head, switching on the AB switch, and here we go. I have to increase the volume, so about -17 to get it close. And a couple of things. Number one, it's a much more closed-off experience. Whereas the Ollo audio tends to produce it almost like you would listen to it on a speaker. It's not exactly to that extent. In fact, a speaker would have a much more wide presentation because you're out in the room. With good, decent speakers, it sounds like you are in some sort of a nice open area, which you are. I mean, you're in a room. Compared to the NDH20, which just has this claustrophobic feel to it in comparison. Now, that doesn't mean that the NDH20 is bad just because it's more closed off. It just means that it doesn't provide that type of natural sensation. Some people may call that intimate. Other people may call it too closed off. Half a dozen on one hand and six on the other, so to speak. Let's go back because there's that micro detail we talked about with the W, right? Ooh, you're dragging it. Ooh, not like that. She sounds like a zombie that way. Ooh. She drags out the W, and it was really gravelly, and it just kind of has this. It's not a visceral nature to it on the Ollo, but it's a really precise nature to it. With the NDH20, because of that closed-off nature of these headphones, it's more muted, and it just sounds mushy, so to speak, muffled and less gravelly and less accurate, in my opinion. I'm going to bump up from -17 to -15 decibels just to try to eke out as much as I can. This is probably as close to the volume as I can get these two headphones. Here we go. Yeah, that dragging out of the W is just echoes kind of strangely in the headphones. It doesn't have a natural decay as it did with the Ollo. It's, once again, as I've said so many times before, it's like you're in a shipping container. It's that weird resonance that remains in the headphone. But let's just keep going. Let's see how this headphone responds with the backup vocalist. Good separation of the vocalists left and right, the backup vocalists. And without everything in the mix right now, I can hear them with their different tonalities. And now everything is playing. You have the drum, the piano, and the three vocalists, the guitar. And although there is separation amongst the vocalists, it's harder to find in comparison to the Ollo. More specifically, the two backup vocalists, their tonalities have melded together, and I can't hear a different tone between them. Whereas on the Ollo, I could. And the piano frequency seems to be interfering more on the NDH20 than it did on the Ollo when everything is in the mix. That piano frequency is kind of creeping into the mid-range. And the piano has this, lingering effect that just sounds muffled more than it really should. And what does that do when you have a resonance that carries through? We can do a couple of things. If it's an open pair of headphones, it has an open character to it, then it'll sound as if it's naturally decaying. But if it's a closed-off headphone, and the headphone is just more claustrophobic, that resonance just kind of echoes inside, and it starts interfering with the other frequencies. That's not to say that the NDH20 is destroying the song. It just has this kind of weird tonality to it when you compare it with another pair of headphones that doesn't have that sort of character. All right, so let's move on to Heartbreak by Chris Serro. Still at -15. I'm going to bring it down to about -18. The thing about Heartbreak is that the vocals are not really upfront mixed in this song. They take a step behind the instruments. That's how it's always been presented to me on neutral headphones. Let's see how it works on the NDH20. Here we go. There's a piano that starts off with the song, and it sounds flat-ish. Here is an electric guitar playing at a higher frequency. A pretty fast decay for the electric guitar. And here comes this heartbeat type bass. Multiple vocalists is what I hear, I think. But it's hard for me to tell because it just sounds like one vocalist whose vocals have been copied and pasted on top of each other. The bass now, the drum, is, it really is kind of overpowering the mids. I can hear the mids, but not particularly clear. I can't understand what she's saying, but that could just be the mix in this song. Now you have all the instruments coming in. And with everything together, it gets really muddy. There's nothing that stands out. It seems like a potpourri of things. It's just all that stuff being shoved into your ear and no one thing having any particular, not particularly standing out from anything else. Now that's partly because of the mix, the way that the song was created. But the other thing is the inability of these headphones to separate, which is a consistency. It's simply not that good at separating multiple instruments, vocals, drums, piano, guitar, you name it. When everything is in a mix and it's playing, it just becomes too muffled, too meshed together. Let's switch to the Ollo audio. Let's try this again. We're at -18. I'm going to bring this down to about -20. Much more open sounding. That electric guitar sounds more open. Fast decay, just like with the NDH20. I can clearly hear multiple vocalists. It's not the same presentation as the NDH20 where it seemed like it was copied and pasted on top of each other. And I can hear at least 2 different vocalists, probably 3. And they have a slightly different tonality. Even with the drum playing, I can hear the vocalists separate. And the entire mix is coming in right now. Again, the song muddies things up. But even with the entire mix in, it seems a little bit more open on the Ollo, and I can still hear the vocalists a little bit better with the entire song playing with the entire mix. So here's what I can say. This song is a good example of when a mix is different from what you expect it to be. If there are lyrics, you expect to hear the lyrics throughout the song. But the way that this thing kind of is mastered, it just makes me feel as if somebody in the process said, I would rather hear the guitar and the bass and not so much the vocalist. And that's fine if that's the decision they made. So in that respect, both the NDH20 and the Ollo do represent it. However, the Ollo simply separates the vocals a little bit better with all the things playing in the mix than the NDH20 does. The NDH20, because of its closed-off nature, just makes things more muddy than they need to be. Whereas the Ollo, even though the muddiness is there because of the song, there's still a bit of separation that I can find, and it's a noticeable difference doing an A and B test. With the Ollo on my head, let's go to When You Walk Into the Room by Vic and Gab. And this song is different from Heartbreak, more similar to Want You Back in that the vocals are, again, primary. Here we go. Negative 22 decibels, and bring it down to negative 24. Electric guitar and drum, clear differences in their tonality. Here's the primary vocalist, and she has a very different tone from the other instruments in the mix. I can hear the guitar, I can hear the drum, I can hear her voice, all very clear. Here comes this backup vocalist. And the backup vocalist is somewhere in the background. I can't really hear her. There is a slight difference in their tonality. But the critical thing for me is that I can hear them, even with everything in the mix. The guitar, the piano, the drum. Okay, so now let's switch to the NDH20 and let's see how this thing performs. And I'm going to increase the volume to negative 16. Here we go. Closed off experience. Increasing the volume to negative 14. No sibilants. The sibilants was a little bit more prevalent on the Ollo than it is on the NDH20. The Ollo didn't get sibilant at all, but it provided that extra detail. You could hear the energy in the higher frequency on the Ollo, whereas with the NDH20, it just kind of weirdly muffles it in comparison. But it's very smooth, the NDH20 is. With everything in the mix, the backup vocalist might as well not be there. I can barely hear her. And I can't say that the mix is destroying the song, but unfortunately it muffles it to a degree that the vocalists are standing basically shoulder to shoulder to all the instruments. And they both have, all the instruments and the vocalists have the same presentation on the stage. And so now you have to pay really close attention to the words. You have to concentrate on it. Whereas on the Ollo, you don't have to concentrate on it. Everything is clearly delineated, differentiated. I will point out that the bass on the NDH20 is warmer a little bit compared to the Ollo, where the Ollo is faster and it's more precise in my opinion. The NDH20 presents the bass warmer, so the resonance sticks just a little bit longer. There seems to be a slight bump to it, and although it doesn't distort, it simply interferes. That kind of makes sense. It's not presenting the vocals the way that the Ollo was presenting the vocals. Let's go to Superposition by Young the Giant. This is male vocals. And I have the NDH20 on my head, negative 14 decibels. Here we go. There's a banjo or ukulele, something, drum. Very smooth, which is consistent with the NDH20. It always presents songs smoothly, for better or worse. The male vocalist is clear. No sibilants. Currently, the vocalist is singing with the drum and the string instrument, and then there's this low buzz thing in the background. I don't hear any distortion. The vocal is clear. Here comes the backup vocalist. And I don't hear a separation with the backup vocalist and all the instruments in the mix now. You have all the instruments playing, the primary vocalist and the backup vocalist, and it sounds like the primary vocalist was copied and pasted to make it sound like there are more than one. It's really hard to tell. Let's switch to the Ollo. And let's try this again. Here we go. And I'm going to bring the volume down because it's going to be too loud. I'm going to bring it down to about -21. Here we go. Yeah, more neutral bass response. Open, a little bit more airy, much more airy. There's a faster decay to the drum. The male vocalist has a lot of energy in the higher register. Again, it's not sibilant, but you can hear that energy up there. If you turned it up really super loud, you might be able to push these things to sibilants. The drum is not interfering with the vocals. The background buzz is more muted than it was on the NDH20, so the vocals stand out. Here come the backup vocalists. And there's a bit more separation on the Ollo audio with the multiple vocalists than there is with the NDH20. Yeah, what I can hear is one of the primary vocalists taking a breath while singing, which I couldn't hear with the NDH20. A much more, in my opinion, a much more neutral, much more flat response in the NDH20. One of the things that you have to really consider is what is neutral, what is flat. Was the song recorded in the way that you're hearing it? So we're making an assumption that the Ollo is representing the song as it was recorded or closer to that mark than the NDH20. But that's just an assumption. I can't say because I don't know what headphones the mixing and mastering artists were wearing when they did this. And I can't say this is how it actually sounded to them, and this is exactly how, or very close to how, they wanted the song to sound in the end. But because we know that the NDH20 has kind of this closed-off experience, and there's an accentuation to the bass response, and a flattening off of the higher register, and a kind of a scooped-out mids, I would stress that based upon all of those factors and the multiple listening sessions that I've had with the NDH20, that the NDH20 is probably not the natural tonality of the song, and that the Ollo audio, with its more neutral response across the board, is closer to the mark. Okay, so I think that's the more accurate way of stating it. Ultimately, what's our result? As with the previous test on the bass response, the Ollo audio simply provides better detail, more separation, less emphasis on any particular frequency. Indeed, I would submit to you that the Ollo audio is more neutral of the two. The sound signature, I think, is quite influenced by the closed-off nature and the open nature of both headphones. The Ollo audio is a much more open-sounding headphone. The NDH20 is a much more closed-off sounding headphone. It's not a matter of slight degrees, it is a matter of fact. It is, in fact, the case. The NDH20 is a strange bird because it does a lot of things to the mids that it probably shouldn't do for a mixing and mastering artist, in the sense that you don't want the bass to be accentuated. If you're listening to your mix on the NDH20 and you say, "Oh my goodness, the drums and the bass guitar is a little too loud. I'm going to turn that down a little bit and I'm going to bump up the midtones, the mid frequency," and then you master it, you send it off. Somebody who doesn't have the NDH20, somebody who has a more neutral pair of headphones, let's say you have the HD 600 or the 650 or the 660, where Sennheiser really does accentuate a little bit that mid-frequency range. That's their signature sound. What are you going to end up with? So the recording artist wearing the NDH20 bumped up the mids and turned down the bass frequency, and you listening on a Sennheiser headphone that already accentuates the mids a little bit. Now you're listening to it, and all of a sudden the mids are just really prevalent, and the lower frequency is not, and you're losing out. To you, that may be a fantastic way to listen. You may really enjoy that. But that's not really what the recording artist intended, is it? They didn't intend for the vocalists to be so far accentuated that the rest of the frequency range is kind of left by the wayside. Now, I doubt that's really what happens. I doubt that if you're a real mixing, mastering artist, you know how to work with your equipment, you know what to look for, that you're really going to make that sort of huge mistake. If you do it, it's probably purposeful. But if you're not somebody who does this for a living, who mixes and masters for big studios, who knows how to read graphs, who has benchmark equipment on your desk in your office, people like us who have YouTube channels, people like us who just mix and master for our own music, we're independent, we rely on our ears and the little money that we have to spend on the equipment that we've been able to purchase. We don't have years and years and years of experience. We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars at our disposal. We may not be able to know. Does that make sense? I mean, we really may not be able to tell the difference that the NDH20 is doing X wrong, or it's doing something that I really don't want it to do. Now, that's partly our fault. It's incumbent on us to make sure that we correct the problem. If we're going to go down the road of mixing and mastering, it is on our shoulders to do the right thing and be more informed about our equipment and how we mix and master. But that shouldn't be the end of the analysis. You know, at some point we have to say that a pair of headphones or any equipment should be better. And I think that the NDH20 should be better. For mid-response, for the mid-range, it's closed off, it's more muffled in some respects, and the separation simply isn't there. Not for a $500 pair of headphones that is being marketed for mixing and mastering, and some other individuals have said this is the best for mixing and mastering, this is the best for reference class. I don't buy it. Indeed, in comparison with the Ollo Audio, the Ollo is simply better. More separation, cleaner presentation, more detail, wider soundstage, more open, airier presentation, the ability to have more energy in the upper frequency range without getting sibilant, the fact that the bass response is not accentuated, that it's neutral. Those are all the factors that lead me to say the Ollo is more neutral, noticeably more neutral than the NDH20. And that is my conclusion regarding the mid-response between these two headphones. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Thank you so much for participating. Hey, how do you like my new microphone, the U195 from Bach Audio? I hope that this microphone is doing some good. I still have my Neumann TLM 103. I still love that microphone, but I'm trying to play around with different microphones, and the U195 was, I found it on sale, and I thought, hey, this looks like a neat microphone. If you have any review requests, please, once again, go down to the description below. That has a link to the Google document where you can make a request. Once you make that request, do me a favor and message me on YouTube, hey, I made a request. That'll help me. I check the request form a couple of times a week, so I will find it eventually. But if you really want to make sure that I got it, send me a message. For those people who keep sending me messages and do reviews, I understand that you may not have been aware that I have a request form, but every video now has a link in the description, so please use that form. It helps me keep track of people's requests. It helps me keep track of what people really want. If there are 4, 5, 6, 7 requests for a particular thing, then that means I gotta do that as soon as possible. In other respects, it helps me keep organized as to what needs to be done and within which time frame. Thank you so much once again. I hope all of you have a wonderful Tuesday. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all my subscribers. We are at over 235 subscribers now, which is mind-boggling to me. And I would extend my gratitude to all of you for subscribing and commenting and watching. Have a wonderful Tuesday.